Okay, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the apartment download. By the way, that song, The Wait by the band, this year is the 45th anniversary of the last concert that the band did at the Winterland in San Francisco. They made a fantastic rock and roll movie called The Last Waltz, and they are recreating it in New Orleans at the New Orleans Jazz Festival one evening, and I'm going down for that. Anyways, so that's why I picked the song today. I'm excited about that, and it certainly is about going back to concerts again. It's one of my main forms of entertainment. So, let's get down to the apartment business and what we all do for a living. There has never been a better time to be alive in the apartment business. It's really been a phenomenal 2 years. That's crazy to say, right? Well, given what the world has gone through, but I think it's clear that we've always known that apartments are recession proof, but apartments are also COVID proof. And the desire of apartments from investors has been extremely strong. And in a choppy world, apartment prices have gone up, cap rates have gone down. Occupancies, took it on the chin a little bit during the depths of COVID, but I think it's come back. It's fair to say that most markets are back better than where they were before. Student housing, which looked like it was going to get really, really hurt, is doing extraordinarily well. Foreign students have returned, and we don't see any problems in apartments anywhere from an occupancy or a rent standpoint. It's really been something that maybe was predictable, maybe it wasn't, but there were a lot of things looking grim 2 years ago. The apartment sector held through well and has come out of this really, really well. So apartment demand is strong from an investor standpoint, and apartment demand is strong from a renter standpoint. Probably the greatest danger that we have to the apartment industry is not the apartment industry, it's government, it's regulation. I mean, we've got an election this year in Ontario. It's an important election this year, and the rental industry has been kicked around by many provincial governments in many unacceptable ways and many foolish ways and so on. So it would be, I think, valuable for us to be active in that area and make our logical voices known that the people on this call are housing providers, right? And so on. So what we want to talk about today is the creation of more product, okay? And the solution to our problems in Ontario and Canada are supply, and it's supply at all levels, right? So today I want to talk about maybe something that isn't talked about too often. How do you convert other assets to apartments? Because other sectors of commercial real estate are hurting more than apartments. So let's first talk about hotels, okay, number one. And hotels have certainly had probably the hardest time of any asset class. Hotels go into the ditch first, and they're the last ones coming out of it also. So we've done some work on hotel conversions. It's not easy. The easiest conversions to make are the apartment buildings that were apartment buildings that were made hotels, right? Because that was the move to make back then, right? Well, probably the easiest move now is to convert them back to apartments, right? Or if you've got a furnished suite building that was an apartment building before, you thought you could make more money converting it to furnished suites. Well, there's a good chance that if you got rid of all that furniture and went to conventional apartments, that you would have more value today, right? Because the cap rate on hotels and furnished buildings is probably significantly higher than it is for apartments. So just throw out the furniture, in a sense, collect less revenue, or certainly more stable revenue, but apply a lower cap rate to it, and the building is more valuable, right? So that'd be the first one I would say is an easy play. An example of that might be a Grid 5 in Calgary. It was an apartment building. It was a hotel for many, many years, and now it's converted back to being an apartment building. The other problem with apartments is that, the apartment room, the hotel rooms are quite small. They're typically around 350 square feet. And so you can't make an apartment out of 350 square feet unless it's a bachelor unit. So you've got to combine the units, and that can become prohibitively expensive because, you own an apartment building by the key is the terminology they use. So if you got, $150,000 for one room, then to combine that with another room is $300,000 just as your base cost. And now you've got to do your renovations, and things like that. And oftentimes in apartments, the plumbing and the electrical don't allow for easy conversion. So you can't put in a washer dryer, you can't put in a full-size kitchen, and things like that. But I would say that hotel developers or hotel owners have the right metabolism or the right DNA to do a conversion. They are risk takers, and the risk in a conversion is hard. And we've done quite a few feasibility studies for hotel owners in the last number of years. And the difference I've come to learn between hotels and apartments is if you build a hotel for, let's say, $20 million, when you finish the hotel, it's worth about $20 million, okay? But you're building it for the cash flow. You want to enjoy the strong cash flow that comes off the building, but with that comes also the volatility, the seasonality, and things like that, things that rentals don't have. If you are an apartment developer and you build an apartment building for $20 million and you do a good job, that apartment could be worth $26 million, right? And so apartment owners build for sort of that capital gain, and then they build for that steady income, but quite frankly, much lower cash flow, right? So I think that there will be more hotels converted, but it's a longer, slower, more painful process, to go through. You can, you can get the hotel empty quite quickly, right? Overnight or the next week. Whereas with an office building, you could have all kinds of problems getting an office building empty to convert. So that's the first one. Second one I wanted to talk about is retail. And this is one that really, really has legs. I would say that our single largest client over the last 3, 4, or 5 years, I could easily identify would be retailers. So we've done more work for fewer people because they're programmatic, owners of shopping centers across Canada. And most shopping centers are 25% building and 75% land. They've got lots of land. And when they first built that retail plaza many years ago, it might have been on the edge of town, but now the city's going around it. There's transit there, there's services there. It's an established neighborhood, and the retail itself is the, is the amenity. So I think you're going to see a lot of apartments being built on retail sites across Canada, both urban, suburban, and smaller towns. They are land banks, and oftentimes they have way too much parking. Rarely do you see parking full in a retail center. So retail guys are poised nicely for apartment development. If you're an apartment developer, partnering with retail owners would be good, or buying old real estate that needs to be repurposed, but you've got income in place while you go through the zoning work and so on, might be a good idea. So I thought today I would cover I think we said the 9 mistakes that retail developers seem to make. Okay. And the first mistake that they make is I think is forgetting to recognize that the cost of capital for apartments is lower, right? So, one of the reasons that apartment cap rates are as low as they are is because of the very beneficial CMHC financing that's in place. So when people run their initial pro forma, it's very important that they get a really good understanding of the capital stack, and that and realize that if you're building, let's say, $100 million worth of a combination of retail and apartments, if you build 70% apartments and 30% retail, your financing on that 70% will be much cheaper than it will be on that 30% retail, right? So if you didn't have to get a lot of leverage, I would say load up on the apartment debt and put as little debt as you can on the retail. And when you combine the two, then your cost of capital is going to be significantly lower. So mistake number 1 is developers don't take into account in their early planning the difference in the cost of capital. Okay, number 1. Mistake number 2 is that sometimes cities will allow you an incredible amount of density on a site, but just because they allow the density doesn't mean it's going to work. So if you have a suburban shopping center in a far suburb of Laval, right, then it doesn't make sense to go underground 4 stories and build 25 stories of towers on top of it, right? And so it's not always about jamming the most amount of density on a site. And oftentimes the shopping centers have got the land that they own on the books as having value. And the natural tendency for the planning people is to cram as much as they can onto the site, but sometimes that's just not economically feasible to build high density, a lot of underground parking in suburban locations. Mistake number 3 that I see, and we see this happen often, is that guys who own retail are retail experts, and they spend their time thinking about the retail and not enough time thinking about the apartments. So if you're going to build a 10-story building, the first floor is retail. There's 9 stories above that are residential. In this case, we're talking about apartments. And there's a lot more money upstairs than there is downstairs, but you tend to sort of go to the things that you're good at doing, the things that you know. And I think they sometimes give, the top floors short shrift. Well, when 90 or 80 or 90% of the revenue is coming from that. So that's mistake number 3. Mistake number 4 is that leasing and property management in retail is very, very, very different from apartments. And just because you have a great property management division for retail doesn't mean that that property management company is going to transition well to apartments. A simple example, I was working for a retailer who had tons of retail across Canada. They built their first apartment building, and I was chatting with the guy responsible for leasing up the apartment building. He was also responsible for leasing up the retail. And in retail, if someone calls you and says, I want to come and visit the space, you check your calendar, they check their calendar, and you agree, okay, next Wednesday at 10 o'clock. And then you book a business meeting at 10 o'clock next Wednesday to come and look at that retail space. In the apartment business, it's very, very different. It's a now thing. I mean, your objective is to get that person, okay, to, when they're on the phone with you or when they're online, is to hang up, grab their coat, jump into their car, and drive to the building. Fair enough? So it's a consumer sale, not a business-to-business sale, and it requires a very different sense of creating a sense of urgency and a much different sales skill than it would to rent a retail space, where you're understanding the client's need and seeing if that space fills it. Here, you just want to get the client into the building, because if you wait till next Wednesday, he's going to go to 5 other places and maybe rent an apartment somewhere else. So it's a different business, the property management. Number 5, this one's kind of interesting. A good retail area isn't necessarily a good apartment area, and a good apartment area isn't necessarily a good retail area, right? So just because the retail is working doesn't mean apartments work there, and vice versa. I'll give you an example. We have a client who owns a site that has excess density, and it's got one of the busiest Shoppers Drug Marts in Canada. In fact, I think it's the busiest, highest yielding Shoppers Drug Mart for prescriptions in Canada. And the reason it's that, because all the apartments that surround it are filled with seniors, relatively modest income seniors, right? And once you're over 65, your drugs are paid for, seniors take more medication. And as a result, if you just looked and said, well, how's the retail doing? The retail is doing fantastic, right? Highest yielding Shoppers Drug Mart in Canada, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the apartments will do well, because the people who are getting those drugs are getting them basically, paid for because of the fact that they are over 65 and do not have a lot of disposable income. So great retail doesn't mean great apartments necessarily, right? Number 6, a number of retail owners have developed condos with partners, okay? And they've had excess land, they built condos, and they've sold those condos. And that's been a pretty profitable business for people for the last, 10, 15, 20 years. But condos and rentals are different. The point I make to retail owners are, if you have successfully developed condominiums where you've built it, sold it, made your capital gain, then reinvested the business, you had no ongoing interest in that property, right? In the rental business, it's very different. You're going to build it, sell it, and probably keep it forever. So just because you've developed condos doesn't automatically qualify that you're going to be successful in developing rentals, mainly because there is no management piece in condos. In rentals, there's a huge management piece that goes on forever. Number 7 is, you may need to give up some prime retail space to create a great rental building or to have a great entrance to your rental, right? Most times you want to use ground floor space for for retail and lease it out at a higher cost than the rental than you would get for if you built a rental apartment there, or put amenity space there, or put a lobby there. And I've often seen retail design where they've given short shrift to the lobby because they would have rather have used the space for retail. And I think that when you look at what you've got stacked above, which is 10, 15, 20 stories, all those 10 or 15, 20 stories are accented by the lobby that you put in, right? And so I think that sacrificing prime retail space for a great lobby is probably a mistake. You need that lobby forever, and it's your arrival experience, and it's the sizzle on the steak, it's the bling on your building. Okay, number 7. Number 8, it's funny why retail guys, if you meet a retail guy, they'll always ask you the question, is there demand? Right? Yeah, in most places in Canada, there is demand for rental apartments. The real question should be, I mean, you can ask the demand question, but it's usually pretty good because you don't have that much new construction. The real question that you want to ask is, what's the rent? Okay, because the building's going to fill up. There's a shortage of rentals in most places in Canada, but a shortage at what rent, right? And rent is the driver. It's not construction cost. It's not land cost. It's rent. That has the single largest impact on your income and expense statement and on the valuation of the building. That's number 8. And number 9 is retail guys are big vision guys. They've got these huge sites, and they often come to us with huge sites with 1,000 units on it, right? And it's kind of crazy that the guy hasn't built a duplex before, right, or any rental property, and they come to you with a plan of to build 1,000 units. 1,000 units on one site is a lot. There are maybe a dozen sites in Canada with 1,000 units. I got to 1,000 units is a tough gig. They're hard to get and keep full. I would rather almost see if you had a large retail site, I'd like to see you put 500 units on one corner and 500 units on another corner, and they're different buildings catering to different markets and to some extent competing against each other. But if you are going to build a large site, you have to phase it in. We can tell you that a marketplace has huge absorption, but it can only absorb so many units per year. Okay, and typically in most larger markets, you can absorb. In a smaller market, I'd say mid-sized town, you can absorb 100 units a year quite easily. Okay, in a larger market, I think you can absorb 200, 250 units per year, right? So we're going to build 1,000 units. You can't build them all at one time. It's kind of obvious you can't, right? You could probably build 1,000 condos all at one time, right? But you can't build 1,000 rental units in one location at one place. So I think that retail is a great opportunity. It's a source of land. It makes sense. It's densification and so on. And one of the things that we do for apartment owners is we who have 50 or 100 sites or something across Canada is we rank the sites. And so they might rank them based on their retail income and their price per square foot on retail, but we rank them, in terms of many factors, in terms of which would be the sites ideal for apartment intensification. And I can say this, the two of them don't match. I guess that's the point. What is a good retail site isn't necessarily a good apartment site, and vice versa. So that's retail. Okay, so the next one we want to talk about is office conversion. And Rod, maybe go to one more slide here. We are running an office conversion event. It's 2 days, 3 hours each. And we've got experts from Canada and the US speaking on how you convert an office. And nobody knows exactly what's happening, but if people do not return to work in the way that they did before, then there's going to be some excess office space. Office is probably a difficult business to be in today. And if there's a conversion opportunity, then it might be in office. So it's all about turning a lower performing asset into a more highly sought after asset. So a B and C office building is probably not highly sought after, but if you converted that to an A-class apartment building, I think that would be highly sought after. Municipal governments are starting to, Calgary is a good example, provide developers with an incentive to convert office buildings to apartments. Calgary supplies, Rod, I think it's $75 per foot okay, to a developer who will take an office building and convert it to residential. It's hard to get out existing tenants, and that can be a problem, right? So, if you got two half full buildings, I mean, you want to have one full and one empty, but it's all going to depend on, tenant leases, the clauses in their demolition clauses, and things like that. And, when you think about, a building, 85% of the cost is above ground. And when you develop an apartment building, or when you do convert an office building into an apartment building, you can really only reuse the structure, right? You got to probably take out the windows, take out the elevators, take out all the interior walls. You're just using the shell, and hopefully there's enough parking there for you also. But some of the common challenges of office conversion are, the windows. Even if they're good windows, they're not operating windows, right? Offices are generally, they don't crank open and things like that. So that can be a problem. They're probably not energy efficient. There's probably the elevators are too many in the wrong place, right? Maybe wind up shutting down one elevator and using that core for services. Oftentimes the floor plate does not lay out well for an apartment. And when you do a conversion, we've done a few, and we've been to many office buildings that have been converted to apartments. The units are a little wonky, and you've got many unit styles. Sometimes you have a long hallway just to get into the apartment, and that sort of wasted space. Corner unit depths, you sort of get longer bowling alley type units. And typically in conversions, I think the unit sizes probably wind up being smaller because of the choppiness. And so, you get 500 to 900 square foot apartments. You've got to buy the shell right from a price standpoint. And I think it's also that one of the challenges, it's not a programmatic business. So if you were building, 4-story wood frame in the suburbs, you could go across Canada and programmatically build that, in many markets. An office converted, it's a local business. And I think it's a one-of business, and every office is different. Probably you're going to see, I think there are 5 office conversions going on in Calgary right now. But it's if the office owner is going through the conversion, then he's a guy who had an office, it's not functioning anymore, and he's looking to change its use and get back to a value that's way higher than it is right now. But if someone's selling an office building, you're buying it. You've got to look at this thing as, what's your shell cost going to be? And I think you have to get paid. My experience is that you have to get paid more to convert an office than you would to get a greenfield site. So if you were building an office at a 6% or a conventional apartment at a 6% development yield, and the exit cap rate was 5%, you got a 100-point spread, right? That may be enough for you to build an apartment building on. But if you're converting an office at a 6% development yield and exiting as a 5, that may not be enough for the risk-reward ratio here, because I think it is more complex. You can get hung up more, and there can just generally be more problems with it. But that being said, I think there are going to be some opportunities for office conversion, and we're looking forward to really bringing some experts on. We're going to go into a lot of detail April 21st and 22nd. Okay, Rod, next slide, please. We spent a fair bit of time looking at the tokenization of real estate, and we've got an event coming up. Do we have a date on that yet? No, but we have a question for you. This is a poll, okay? And the poll is this: just how much interest, right? If you could launch the poll, how much interest do you have in the tokenization of real estate? I'm making the assumption you know what it is, but it would be interesting just to know whether it's low, medium, or high. Rod, do you launch that? Good. So just pick one of them. How much interest do you have in the tokenization of real estate? You have a couple of seconds, and then we're going to show you the poll results. So we got 45 people on here. You click on the one. Yep. Go ahead, Rod.
Derek,
Yes.
What is tokenism? What does that mean?
Well, you take an apartment building and you issue tokens for the building and you sell those tokens. So instead of me, if I got a 100-unit building, I can sell it to one guy for, we'll buy 100 units. I guess it was condo title. I could sell to 100 people. I could now create a token for the building and sell it to 1,000 people or 10,000 people. And I can do it worldwide on my own platform. Fair enough? So it's done on the blockchain, and it allows anybody anywhere in the world to buy a building. So for example, if I wanted to buy apartment buildings in Canada, I could buy Canada's largest REIT called CAPREIT, okay? And CAPREIT owns 400 buildings across Canada. So I would buy this basket of buildings. In tokenization, and it's a very early thing, in tokenization, I can choose one building or some buildings or buildings that meet my criteria. So let's say I thought apartment buildings near hospitals would make sense. Fair enough. So then if I want to buy CAPREIT shares, they only have 1 or 2 buildings near hospitals, right? But when the world, and I think it's when, not if, tokenizes, you'll be able to buy individual buildings as much or as little as you want anywhere in the world, right? So it's like you create a market for your building and you create an exchange for your building, and people invest in that building through blockchain and through these tokens, right? It's a pretty radical idea. Right now it happens with art and with funny things, you know what I mean? But with real type assets, we think as the technology develops, this is something that can happen. Okay, so it is using blockchain technology. Okay, so Rod, we got that, and if you're interested in that, we're going to have experts from a couple of countries, and this is an international thing. I mean, the guy that could build our platform, we interviewed a company in Denmark, right? It's just something that's worldwide. But you build an exchange, you put your building in that exchange, and you create tokens for the buildings, and those tokens now become saleable to anybody, anywhere, at any time. And you can go down to very small quantities. So you could go down to $10 per token, right? It's very, very interesting that more and more information is being made available. It's still a little bit of the Wild West, but part of what we do in our business is look forward to the gaps in the marketplace. There's not a lot of office conversion going on right now, but if this work from home phenomena continues, then we think there are going to be lots of opportunities for office conversion. That's why we're talking about it now, and that's why we're talking about it early. Okay, Rod, next one. We're really excited about this. We've spent, Rod and his team have spent the last 2 years putting together what we call Apartment Developer University. And our goal has always been is to train developers how to build apartments, but it's not to train you to become a developer. You already are a developer. You have construction skills. You have development skills. We're going to teach you the last 10% of the business so you can pivot to become an apartment developer. So let's say you're a hotel developer. You know how to buy land, you know how to put a hole in the ground, you know how to put up a building, but you don't know how to put up an apartment building. We're going to teach you that part of it, and we're going to teach it to you. And we're going to show you, I think, a short video on it right now, Rod. And this is just something we're going to launch this summer, but we're excited about it. We think it's going to grow the apartment developer community across Canada and around the world significantly. Rod, why don't you play the video?
Welcome to Apartment University, a community of developers where you can learn and connect with other industry experts and developers.
Part of what we've done with this portal is taken this legacy that we have for 35 years. Our goal is to teach you how to do it as opposed to do it for you.
This is your opportunity to become a credible apartment scientist. From the very first step of the apartment development to a complete building, all in one learning portal. Apartment University is designed for the entire development fraternity. So how does it work? With a subscription-based membership, you will have access to a vast library of courses through lesson videos, ebooks, quizzes, and PDF assets. You will also be able to connect with your peers and various industry experts through live events, webinars, and one-on-one coaching opportunities.
We're connectors. We're connecting you to other developers. We're connecting you to industry experts, and we're connecting you to information, and we're connecting you to tools. That's what the learning portal is. We're your coach. okay? And we're gonna guide you through this. But we're not just saying, go do this. We're giving you the exact tool you need.
You will be getting not only theoretical knowledge, but actionable knowledge. Grow your network with your peers and experts in the industry, and avoid costly mistakes to maximize your profit. You will also get access to latest trends in technology and strategies, and private coaching for a personalized experience. We are the developer of developers.
Thanks, Rod. Rod, am I good?
Yep.
Okay, we're back. I've also noticed one thing that will be a future topic that I'm going to talk about. And if you're a developer, this is really, really good news. I have come to the learned conclusion that developers live longer than most people. And in the future, I'll explain why I believe that. But my sample size is probably only about 20. And I really think that the business of development keeps you sharp, keeps you young, and keeps you focused. And I do believe that developers live longer. A couple of other events that we've got coming up. So the Global Office Conversion event, you can talk about that. May 12th, we're doing a session on apartment construction costs, because construction costs have gone up. We've got some general contractors speaking to us about that topic. I think that if you're in the apartment business today, that's an important one for you beyond that. And that's, I think, like a 90-minute session that we're doing. Our big event, this is our 13th year of running our affordable housing and new apartment development session, 14 sessions, 75 speakers. We run it at the Royal Military College Institute in Toronto, and it is posh. We have space for 77 people, but there's also an online version. And then this year at the Real Estate Forum on November 28th, we're doing a session for institutional apartment developers. Our core market, by the way, is private apartment developers. That's who we work for, that's who we love. But a lot of apartments get built by larger institutions. They have different wants, needs, and problems than the private developer. And so we're going to teach a session for them. That will be at the Metro Toronto Convention Center. And it's the day before Real Estate Forum. And we run that, I think, for through 3 or 4 years. But again, we're going to focus on the institutional apartment developer. Okay, Rod, next slide. We have, after probably one year it took us to write this book, The Intentional Apartment Developer. It's in the printer now, and it'll be available online here, but also on Amazon and other places where they sell fine books. The Intentional Apartment Developer, and it's a 300-page hardcover book on the steps of apartment development. Again, we make the assumption that you already know how to develop. This is going to teach you how to pivot and become an apartment expert. Almost finished is our next book, and this is a book on affordable housing. Again, we assume you're a developer already, but this is about the nuances for building affordable housing in Canada, and it's written for the private sector. That's our client, the entrepreneurial developer. That's probably ready in a couple of months to get the hard copy. Next slide, Rod. More and more, I'm going to be talking about longevity and I guess the older you get, the more you think about how much time you have left. And I think it's fascinating that technology is changing. And developers already live longer. We're going to teach them how to live even longer. We'll be talking about this topic and meeting with a number of developers to talk about how developers think, and I'll be talking about why I believe developers live longer. Right, next slide. So we couple of other topics that we're working on for the future is one's going to be titled "The Future of Parking." How much parking should you build today? I mean, should you build zero, getting ready for the driverless car? What do you do with existing parking if you have too much of it? And so we're going to get experts in parking from around the world talking about that. And I think that in one of the sessions, we're going to do a deep drill on cap rates. What makes up a cap rate? When a cap rate compresses by 0.1%, it has a dramatic increase on value. So what are the components of cap rate? And everyone thinks that interest rate is the number one factor that drives cap rates. It's not. It's number 3. The number one factor that drives cap rates is buyer IRR expectations. And in a world starved for yield, that's why cap rates are going down, not necessarily because they're cash flowing more, right? So, and the second one is rent growth. So if you believe that rent growth is going to be strong, you will pay a lower cap rate for a building. And the third is interest rates. If interest rates go up, then of course cap rates come down, but it's definitely not a one-to-one relationship. So that's when we talk about the future. Thanks very much for joining us today. That our next session is July 5th, and we just appreciate you joining us. And for those of you that came in a little bit late, we start off at about 10:30, just with some general questions that we would chat around if you come to one of our conferences, and then we start our formal session at 11 o'clock. Okay. Again, thanks for joining us, and Rod, thanks for putting this all together.